Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. I'm Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert, and I am really excited to dig down into today's episode. Okay, poddies, I'm excited because it's like you have a double dose of Jess on the podcast today, which I'm so excited about because I have brought the amazing Jessica Dante onto the show. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited, A, because we have the same name, which kind of makes me feel like twins.
Me too.
Only you're like the tall, thin, attractive one. And
I'm stop. No.
Like the hobbit in the corner.
No, stop.
So I'm really excited about this because I met you when we were both speaking at Janet Murray's Media Influence Live event last year in the summer. And it was epic because you are all about a business that is not internet marketing related. And that's so nice and refreshing. Like, I'm just going to throw that out there. It's really nice to talk to somebody who's not like, I'm another internet marketer. Not that I hate internet marketers. I am one. That's cool. But sometimes it's just nice to see a different business. And you run an incredible YouTube channel, which I have been watching over the last few weeks, purely because Sam is coming back soon from his deployment. And we're looking for things to do in London. And your channel is all about being a tourist in London. And despite having lived there for like 5 years, I never did one touristy thing. I have never been to like the London Eye, for example. I have never seen, you posted on Instagram today, this Millennium Bridge thing that apparently loads of people are having their photos taken with. I have not done this and yet worked right by it. So I'm really excited to talk about why you decided to set up a business about loving London because it's kind of smog filled and gross sometimes, but also how you've built that up.
Yeah. So I moved here about 5.5 years ago from New York, and I had always been a blogger, and I liked blogging for a bit, and then I kind of wanted to do some more with it. I went into freelance. I've always worked in social media, so I've had a background in that for a while, but I ended up leaving a permanent full-time job that I had, and I wanted to do more with this blog, but then I was like, I'm not actually reading blogs anymore, but I'm watching a lot of YouTube, and there's not a ton of content out there on YouTube about London. So I started up a YouTube channel. This was about 3 years ago, and I kind of tried a whole bunch of different topics because I wasn't sure I definitely wanted to do just London, because this was back before I was like such a like niche loving person. So I was like, I don't want to conform or I don't want to restrict myself. And now I'm like, I look back thinking that I said that. I'm like, God, that was so dumb. But
we'll talk about that later because I really love that you brought that up.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I kind of was just like, all right, let me just make some travel content and let me do some tips and then see like kind of, let me test the waters out. I did some stuff about packing. I did some stuff about just like general travel tips, stuff about Europe. And then I did a couple of videos about London because I was like, you know what? I live in London and there's, tons of people that come here, obviously, and there's not a ton of info on YouTube specifically about this. So let me try it out. So I filmed a couple of videos, which one of those first ones has had now like 1.2 million views on it.
That's amazing.
And it's an awful video though. It's so bad. Like, and also half of the information's not relevant anymore. So I always feel bad that people are still seeing it. I have to do an update on that one. But it was just me sitting in front of the camera in my room and giving 10 important things to know before you come to London. Really basic, but it just really took off and got into YouTube suggested videos early on and had kind of a snowball effect and still is getting recommended to people. So when I saw the success from that video, I was like, okay, on to something. Plus, in terms of travel and building a business around like content and travel, it's hard to have a sustainable business because if you have to go and travel all the time to be able to make content, that's really difficult to be able to do. So actually, like if you're coming at it from instead of a content creator perspective and instead as a business person with thinking about like the profitability of something, being a travel blogger, influencer, YouTuber that goes all around the world is really difficult to achieve. So
And that's really interesting because I think a lot of us kind of see, especially in the internet marketing world, it's always like, oh my God, living my first class lifestyle and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm flying first class all the time. And I think it's really important to remember that that really would eat massively into profit margins. You know, that's a huge kind of slice of that particular pie because first class flying is not cheap. So I think it's really important that you actually bothered to look at it, because it could have been really easy for you to be, because clearly you like cities like New York is one of my favorite cities in the world, and then London, well, okay, yeah, it's fine, it's another of my favorite cities, but it's that kind of thing. If you wanted to explore the world in big cities, A, prices are sky high in cities, B, flights, like C, actual time to edit and produce videos on YouTube is lengthy, right?
Yes, exactly. And there's a lot of people in my industry that they're able to go and produce videos in other parts of the world because they get sponsored by tourism boards and companies, but also it's different in terms of how sponsorship works for travel, because if the company has to shell out $5,000 for you and your team to go to this destination and to actually just be there and get around, then it's harder for them to justify then on top of that paying $5,000 per video that you're going to produce because of the reach that it's going to get to your audience. But then also where's that return on investment for them? Mm-hmm. So it's a really difficult thing to navigate. And I definitely, the people who are doing it, I like give major props to them because it's incredibly difficult. So, but at the end of the day, I thought, you know what, I'm here in London. It's much easier for me to go and film and create content here because I live here, but also this is the place that I'm most knowledgeable about. And I can actually speak as an expert because I guess I was about 2 years into my time here, but I also had the advantage of I'm new. So I'm like super excited about this new city I'm living in and can't get enough. And luckily I still feel that way. And I still love like trying new things and there's still so much to explore, but at least I had that lens on of like being a newbie, but also soaking it in every single day. So I knew I could like present myself as an expert instead of trying to like go to a bunch of different places, be there for 5 days, and then try to give information that actually I don't really maybe know very well. So
100%. And I think that is important. Like you were saying earlier about niching, you know, I think when everyone starts out, we're always like, oh, we're going to start with the end plan. And I think it was Stephen Covey who was like, yeah, start at the end. And I really disagree with this. Like, I'm really sorry, Stephen, if you ever listen to my podcast, I don't hate you. I don't think you're a bad man, but that phrase, start at the end, it's really hard because you don't know where your business is ever really going to go until you start moving on it. And I think that's kind of the thing with niching. It's what stops a lot of people because they're told start at the end. And so they think about this like massive plan where are they going to be a speaker on a stage? Are they going to travel the world? Are they going to have like a, huge following on any platform? And how are they going to make that happen? And then it stops them doing anything. And they try and do just little bits of everything, but in a 2D kind of fashion. So they're sort of a speaker, they're sort of an author, they're sort of a this, sort of a that. And they never actually dial down and create that loyal following that ultimately is what you need to push your business forward.
Yes, exactly. I agree. And at the end of the day, it's going to be harder to like create that content because you don't know who you kind of know who your target market is, but the more that you niche down, the more that you can visualize who that person is, but more importantly, like what their struggles are, and then fixing those. And that's where I get all my ideas for pretty much every video that I make, the blog post that I write. It's a lot of knowing what people are struggling with their planning and when they're eventually going to get here. Like, for example, I know that even though it's super easy for me to get around London because I know how to use the tube system really well, it's like absolutely terrifying for somebody who's coming from the US, and like the majority of people in the US have never used public transportation before. So that is like, but I know that because I know who my audience is and I like can speak to them, and also I can ask them stuff like that if I hadn't thought of that. I didn't think of that. I only know that because actually they tell me that, but yeah.
And that's the thing, like building a successful business is the majority of the time it's not driven by what you want to do. It's all about what does my audience want from me, and then you go and cater to that, and then along the way you add in your own stuff that you think, oh yeah, I just really like to do this, and it's like that, I don't know, gratification type piece that you think, I want to do this, and so I'm just going to have this one bit for me. But actually the majority of content creation is defined by what your audience are looking to hear. And I think that's something that's really interesting for people who are looking to explore new platforms, because I get a lot of people who come to me and say, I want to be really successful on YouTube, or I want to be really successful with a podcast. And you can be, but I do think it takes longer on those platforms because there's a lot more work that goes into creating the content itself and editing and producing it, but also it's higher barrier to entry, and that's something I was talking with JLD about a few episodes ago, when he kind of said, look, he broke the mold for podcasting. He did it every day, and everyone else is like, I'm going to do it once a month or something. And people said it wouldn't be successful because it was going to be so hard. But the reality is he then became the most successful because he kind of set the highest barrier to entry. And you have to keep putting those reps in continuously. So you've had your channel for a long time.
Yes. Well, I guess kind of. I feel like it's a long time, but also actually when we think of people who have these humongous channels, it's kind of, they've been doing it for 6 or 7 or 8 years, some of them 10 years. And so I guess I say like about a little more than 3 years I've been doing mine. So I'm really happy with the progress, and that is a long amount of time.
It is.
I guess I've been grinding, like that is, but also I'm like, there's so much more I don't know. Yeah, I know what you mean, but
it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because I think it's not like a long time, but it's a long time to be consistent. Yes. And put out consistent content and consistently listen to your audience and consistently build a fan base, I think that's probably more accurate than a long time, because I think ultimately, in terms of time, it's a really short amount of time to have such a successful business. But in terms of patience, and tenacity and determination and the amount of content you have to create and produce, it's a really long time.
Yes, you're right. I totally see your point. And also I guess I'm at the point in my business now where I kind of forget the first year and a half, 2 years of being consistent with creating videos and not really seeing, definitely not seeing any money, but not seeing very much coming back from that. But so yeah, in that sense, I know exactly what you mean. And it is crazy, like how much you really have to put into something like this to be able to start to see results. And just going back to what you're saying about the thing about, because I was listening to an episode with John Lee Dumas earlier today about the barriers to entry. Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with that. And that's why I think YouTube is still a really good platform for people to be getting into, because it's, for some people, it seems like there's everything's oversaturated, but then for others, it's not, because it's still that same high. It is probably the highest barrier to entry, because you have to be on camera, you have to make sure that audio is good, but also it looks good. There's a huge learning curve when it comes to editing, I totally agree with that, because that's why I started to see success earlier, because nobody was really there were some people that were doing videos about London, and there's like Visit London that does things here or there, which is the tourism board and things like that. But it's interesting because there's not that much video, but then if you go onto Pinterest or Google and you search for written content about London, I mean, because I've been trying to see, I want to do more written content and get back into that. And I've been trying to do like keyword research and see what gaps there are. But I mean, everything has been written about London. There is not one thing. Like, I think I did one search, like London hotels with rooftop bars and pools, and like there was an article about it. And there is just but it's lower barrier to entry, because depending on the organization that's running it, you could have someone who doesn't even live in London writing stuff about that, because it's a lot easier to be able to write something and find photos on the internet. which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just easier to do. So it's harder to break through all that noise. And it's to the point where I'm like, I'm not 100% sure investing my time and my business's money into that is going to actually be worth it for me. So it's one of those things I'm exploring right now.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like the transparency around it, because I think sometimes it can be really hard to think about what are people that you consider yourself or consider to be more ahead of you in business, what are they experimenting with? And it's like something that nobody talks about, because everyone's like, oh, well, if you're successful, you should never say that something went wrong or that you're experimenting with something or testing something new. And I think it's really interesting because everybody is consistently having to test and adjust, especially in the current climate. You know, we're in a really interesting time economically, politically, and, you know, I'm not going to use the B word, but really, just really. And I think that does make it really difficult to look at where you actually spend your time and what's going to be the most valuable use of it. Because you can like writing all you want, but if it's not going to bring a decent return, but creating more video content is, it's just easier to dial down on what you already have, because people are already there and they already want to consume the content in that particular way. And I think that there's a lot to be said for going high barrier to entry first with your content medium. And then you can look at things that are a bit easier. You know, you can look at, because you are like, you take some beautiful photos and put them on Instagram, and your like social profiles look beautiful and things like that. But in terms of where your customers are coming from, they're really dialed in on being like, right, okay, where can I find the best restaurant in London that nobody else knows about? Or where can I find the best kind of rooftop bar that's going to be the least expensive? I loved what you said about the Hoxton bar. Like, yes, exactly. But it's that kind of thing. And I think that is really important for people, because running a business, you're always overcoming the next hurdle before it even happens. And I think that's something that's really interesting this year.
Yeah, I agree.
So why when you started, why was like in terms of moving your business forward, why didn't you decide to go down the internet marketing style route of, I'm going to be somebody who shows you around London myself? Or do you know what I mean? Open up some of a service provider type route where you were seeing people one-to-one and taking them on like a little guided London experiment.
So that's a really good question. And I do get people asking me about, specifically with your example of tours, asking me why I haven't done that. And I've thought about it so much. But I personally am not a tour guide, and I don't really like tour guiding people. I like sharing the information, but I don't really want to bring people around. But I mean, there's also the fact that if I'm doing tours 3 times a week, that's probably an entire day I'm taking away from the rest of my business, which is even once a week. That is a lot of time to be taking away from other things that actually generate more money. There's other factors, again, specifically about the tours. Margins are very low for tours because there's a ton of competition out there. I have two, but now one partner, a tour company that I like 100% highly recommend, and they just would do it. I could never be as good as they are. So I'm happy to recommend them. And obviously I have like an affiliate set up with them. So when I do that, I get compensated for that word of mouth. But it's also like, that's a huge undertaking. Talk about high barrier to entry. Like, even if it was a case of I wasn't the one that was doing tours, I would have to set up a system to have multiple tour guides, train them up, make sure they're good. Then when one quits, who do I get to go next, and this and that. So yeah, it's just not really ever been anything that I've wanted to dive into. If I had maybe some more expertise in it, I would, but I don't know. It stresses me out even thinking about it, to be honest.
You're like, oh my God, hives.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because you're really good at staying in your own lane, and yet you have created a business where you have like multiple streams of income, and you've been really creative about the revenue streams that you've chosen for your business specifically.
Thank you. I have been trying to be creative, so I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. It's been really interesting because I have listened to and watched and read so much information about internet marketing. I feel really well versed in that. And that's probably why I'm one of the very few YouTubers, at least that I know of, that are actually being able to, well, there's a lot that have like their own businesses built around it, but a lot of it stems from them having talent agents and then they do brand work and things like that. But I think from my internet marketing knowledge, a huge thing that I wish I'd started earlier, and I feel like everyone says this who finally ends up doing it, and I think you know what I'm going to say, but I started to build an email list, and
Yeah.
I don't know any other YouTubers really. I think maybe a couple that are, but nobody's doing it to the level that I'm doing, that I know of course. I don't know every YouTuber in the world, but that is not something that is done in my industry, but that is how I've been able to propel my business to where it is now, considering in about 3 years, but also considering in the grand scheme of things. There's 80,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We have about 120,000 community members across everything. But in the grand scheme of that, that's nothing. That is a drop in the bucket compared to some of these other creators. But I have been able to build a business around that because I've built that email list for the last couple of years. And that's like the lifeblood of YouTube's a huge part of my business, but I would probably rather lose my YouTube channel over my email list, I think. I don't know. That's bold.
That's so juicy. I love that. I'm like, oh, and I think that's really interesting. So one of the things that I'm always talking about is don't build your house on other people's foundations. And effectively, like when we're using social media, and I use social media and you do, and basically everyone who's running a business anywhere is using social media for something, whether it's customer care, whether it's advertising, like whatever that might be. But for me, social media, and I said this on the podcast last year, it's become this kind of really hard balance of when I'm a social media consumer, if I don't carefully curate what I see, I'm just waking up to a newsfeed of people who like go and be better. And that makes you feel really shitty because you're like, oh, well, you know, it's having a good day and now I've got to go and improve all these things. And so I think it's really interesting that, you know, as somebody who has like 80,000 subscribers is a lot, especially when you consider the average person is not like, they're not visiting London every 2 weeks, you know, so to have 80,000 people who are consistently engaged and consistently absorbed by a topic that is so specific, even when they are not necessarily going to be a regular visitor, is a huge deal. But the very fact that you're like, right, okay, well, actually the most important asset I have is still the one that I own and that I can curate and control and start the conversations with, that's a huge deal in the internet marketing world in general.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this is the thing about social media is that I could wake up tomorrow and my entire YouTube channel could be gone and there's no getting it back. My entire Instagram account could be gone. I mean, my website could be down, like all that. I mean, I know you own your website a little bit more than everything else, but at the end of the day, like you don't own any of those platforms. And it's actually like it's not a good business decision to not have something that you own yourself, you know? I'm just like thinking about a more traditional business,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be kind of like relying on selling one product,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a good idea. Like if you have one product, like someone walks into your store and you sell this bread maker or this like really cool gadget bread maker, how easy is it for someone else to rip that off and then they do it for 10 pounds less, and then you've just lost your entire business. So it's the same thing for anything that you're doing digital.
And it's really interesting because again, it's about whether you decide to compete on experience or whether you decide to compete on price. You know, that's the other factor that comes into that. If you look at, you know, Blockbuster is probably the best example in the last 15 years of a company that just was like, no, we're not going to adapt and we're going to be fine. And like a year later, everyone's like, oh, what was Blockbuster? Like, there are literally kids now who are born and kind of looking at their TV and they're just able to access Netflix, and they have never known the pain of having to return a video when it's raining, when you know you're going to get a late fee. Like, they've never known that pain.
Exactly. Or I saw a comedian, I can't remember which comedian it was now, but I saw one comedian that was like, could you imagine explaining to these kids now that they go on Netflix and they go to click on a movie and then a message pops up that says, you can't watch this movie because someone else in your neighborhood is watching it. Like, imagine.
I love that, and it's so true.
Yeah.
I may start doing that. I might just work out a little way of doing it and really drive my boyfriend crazy. Just like, put it over the TV. You should be able to watch that, but Jess already watched it. So
Yeah.
Oh my god! But it is true, isn't it? It is this adapt and like retain your audience, because your biggest fans, I'm sure that people who really love Blockbuster at no point expected Blockbuster to go bust. They figured that like people would make it happen, you know, and that it would just carry on, and that it was going to be fine, and that, you know, nobody was going to move over to the shady Netflix kind of platform where who knew you didn't have to put a disc into your player anymore. Like, you could actually just watch it on the TV. And I think a lot of that is complacency. There's a lot of complacency when it comes to building a business, and also, like you were saying earlier about the risks of having social media channels stopped and removed, there's a lot of complacency of, well, that won't happen to me because I don't break the rules, or I don't post stuff that I'm not supposed to. But with all the recent changes, you know, I was listening to the radio this morning and they were saying that they're thinking about pushing Instagram in the UK to really monitor the images that it's putting out, and really making sure that vulnerable people aren't allowed to see images that could be distressing or harmful or affect their mental health. Now, that's terrifying for certain businesses, because what could be judged under that particular umbrella, and that could put, you know, health businesses at risk. It could put, you know, lots of businesses, it could almost censor their content. And so if you don't have an email list, if you don't have a real estate, if you don't have a platform for your customers specifically to be able to contact you, you might find that over the next few years your content is censored by a social media company, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they have to ultimately protect their business model, which is, we need as many people, as many users as possible, and we need to not get wrapped on the wrist for doing things that are potentially harmful to others.
Yes, exactly. And it's been the same kind of thing in the YouTube space where, not specifically that, but there's just been like the last couple of years, things about advertisers leaving because of certain types of content and this and that. And it's exactly the same thing, really. So you just always have to be diversifying and have something that you can always hold on to. And you don't have to, I mean, to a point, you have to regulate yourself in terms of emails that you're sending and such, but it's different, obviously.
I love that. So how do you stay in your own lane? Because you're super focused, like you really are. And you know, I think one of the biggest things that's come up through this conversation is that you're like, okay, here's my business, here's my blinkers, and away I go. And you're doing things that other people aren't doing in your space. You know, you're being innovative in the industry. But do you ever look outside and kind of go, maybe I should just, you know, start a Facebook group or do a thing? Like, how do you really keep yourself in that focus zone?
Well, so I have to say that that's hard to answer, I think. I try as much as I can to adapt things that I hear for my own business. So it might mean that I completely change what I've heard has worked for other businesses, but I like still have a bit of inspiration from that. But also I think a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes of, like, I have tried a lot of stuff that kind of falls into like the usual internet marketing thing. Like, for example, I haven't tried a membership site, but I keep thinking, is this something that I want to do? But then I asked in a viewer survey if that's something that people would be interested in. And they were like, we don't get it. I don't understand. Why would you do that? I wouldn't pay for that. I don't get it. I tried to do like group consulting calls where we could like talk through people's problems they were having before their trip to London. They weren't into that. I did like pre-sales to try to see if that there was interest of that. So I also don't want to be like sitting here and being like, well, I'm so great and I'm so smart and I know that I like can do this and I stick with this, because I have tried a lot of things and it's just not worked. But I guess to also answer your question, I think some of it has come from my own, just looking at my own problems when I travel. So for example, the 2 travel guides that I sell, they're digital travel guides. Both of them come with a PDF and then also a digital map that goes onto your phone and it's integrated with Google Maps. And it's not like a groundbreaking idea, but I thought of that because I personally don't like going to cities and carrying around a big travel book, but also if you're in Paris or in London or another big city, they're not, you might read something that's in the book and you're like, sweet, that sounds awesome. How do we get there from here? And then you open up Google Maps and it's like, oh, okay, that's like 40 minutes away. Is there anything else like around here? Well, I can't really tell because this says this is in this area, but I don't know is this area near here? I don't know. And that was just a personal frustration of mine. So I try really hard to take in any problems that I have. And I've been on a couple of really big trips that were a bit more out of my comfort zone over the last couple of years. And the entire trip, I'm just writing down, not the entire trip, obviously I had some fun, but I do, I have a note in my phone or in my notebook if I have it with me, and write down all of like the problems or the things I was having problems with. So for example, I was in Sri Lanka early last year. And when I was doing all my research, I was so confused. I was reading some things about how you can pretty cheaply hire a taxi driver to take you from town to town. But I was like, do I have to book that now to get a better price? Or do I need to, or will the hotel, like, are they going to rip me off if I do it through them? And I could not for the life of me figure that out. And all different things like getting from the airport to the hotel and things like that. And so I think that's like really helped me to try to make sure I'm always developing things, not necessarily because I'm hearing, oh, this works well, but to make sure that it's actually what travelers need help with, is just being aware of what I need help with when I'm in their position.
I think that's really true. And I think the thing with travel is that you can get yourself caught up in really sticky situations if you're in a new space quite easily. And I think sometimes that can be really tough because then you're not in a familiar surrounding. You may or may not speak the language. And then there's suddenly loads of pressure. Like we went to Paris a couple of years ago. Sam surprised me with a trip. And I was like, yeah, I've always really wanted to go to Paris. And we stayed in a lovely little hotel and we said, hey, we just want some good French food, like authentic French food. And they said, okay, well, here are 2 recommendations. And one was this amazing little place called the Bistrot de Théâtre, and it was just outside the Moulin Rouge, and it was like family run, and they had like snails, and it was great, really, really great. The second one was when we said, okay, we want to go out for a really nice meal, and we're prepared to spend a bit more, and like that's fine. And Sam is relatively fluent in French. So we go to this French restaurant and he's asking in French for a table and all this kind of stuff. And they seat us at one end of the restaurant and it's lovely. And I speak passable French. I can ask for a beer and I can ask for the police. Like I'm that kind of sort of linguist in France. And so they come over and this lovely elderly French waiter wants to take our order. And so I kind of explain in French, look, my French is not great because I'm English, but I'm going to try. And he says, ugh, English, and walks away, like literally just leaves. And I was like, aha, that's really cute, thinking he was joking. He never came back. He sent someone else and they were like, we only have like 1 English speaker in the whole place. And I was just like, oh, I could have done the old, I'm just going to point at the menu and things like this. And Sam was mortified. He was like, seriously, why did you just keep quiet? But it was one of those things. And when we went back to the hotel and we explained like what had happened, they said, we're so sorry. We didn't realize that we should have told you that only the better French speaker should have said anything. We were like, oh, but had we done our research, had we kind of looked around and thought about it or gone on TripAdvisor or anything like that and not just taken the one-off recommendation, we'd have probably realized it wasn't the place for us. So I think it is, sometimes you do have to just go on your own experiences and what's going on and what do you see that's kind of quirky.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Thank you so much. Seriously, this has been really interesting. And I know there are going to be tons of people who are like, I've always wanted to visit London, but I don't want to just see, Big Ben, especially not at the moment because scaffolding everywhere.
It doesn't look very nice at all. Yeah.
It's really awful. There used to be, there was that whole phase of internet marketing where loads of people came over and they had their photo taken in front of Big Ben and they all looked really nice. And I'm like, there are generations of baby business coaches everywhere who are like, when is Big Ben going to be fixed? And I kind of imagine that somewhere on a calendar it's written, it's like, Big Ben is going to be fine, everyone go. And there will be like 2 days where thousands of people are just stood there trying to get the perfect selfie. That makes me very happy, by the way.
Good. It's not going to make me happy when I'm trying to get through that bridge and I'm like, get out of the
way. Yeah, just move. So if people are considering coming over to London, having a look around and getting your advice and kind of eyes on the ground at what is actually going on here, what they should be visiting and seeing, where can they find you?
On loveandlondon.com, or if you search for Love in London on YouTube or Instagram, you will find me.
Amazing. And she does take amazing photos. Seriously, I'm all over your Instagram feed at the moment thinking somebody has managed to make London look pretty.
Oh, thank you. It's very nice. It's a nice, a lot of our community members contribute to that, but also I've been using the Google Pixel 3 and it takes like amazing photos. So
top tip from a pro. Thank you so much for coming on. And like I say, guys, if you are interested in visiting London, in meeting I can't call you a tour guide. I'm going to say a travel connoisseur. There we go. Who is particularly focused on making London look brilliant and help you enjoy your stay even better. Make sure you visit loveandlondon.com or head over to Jess's YouTube channel and you can get her eyes on the ground at what really is up and coming over in the big smoke. I'll see you guys in the next episode.